Hi, I'm Richard White. I'm from Australia, visiting the UK, and at the moment we're at Lanercost Priory, and I'm here for the Photographer Academy. It's raining outside, which is why we're under here in the vaults, or vault. I'm not sure whether there's an S that goes on there. And I'm thinking of making a picture of the archways and the columns, which I find are really interesting. Some beautiful light that you may be able to see coming off the central column here that I've got this little camera focused on. I've used this as more as a bit of a Polaroid for this one to see whether I want to bring out my 5.4 and make a shot, which I think I will, because it's got really good potential for a black and white picture. I think the light is rather beautiful and soft, and when I'm printing this in a darkroom, I'll be able to just add a little more contrast to deepen those blacks and bring out the highlights a little more. My basic composition here is I've decided to put this column that's right here, right in the middle of the picture. It's often said you shouldn't put something that's strong and central in the middle. But I'm one for doing that quite often. I think it really, it's very arresting because it takes you straight to that point, and then everything from that immediate point farms out from there. And I like the fact that I've made this statement with this column, making it so bold, which is the reason I like to go for this center. There is a window behind this column here, which is nicely giving some light falling off on both sides, so it gives some nice separation. And we've got windows off to my right-hand side, which is illuminating some of the archway here. So I'm going to take some readings with my spot meter, which I use for the 5.4, and I'm guessing, well, in fact, why don't we just get one. It's giving me an EV of 5. Exposure value is EV, which is not really used too much these days. Over on that far wall, I'm getting 2 and a bit, and up here I'm getting 2 and a bit also. So between the light hitting the column and the light up the top here, there's about a 3-stop difference, which for film, black and white film that I'm using, and processing will be quite normal and quite easy to do, and you know, I don't have to think is there too much initial contrast. In fact, by giving a longer exposure that I will do, it will increase the contrast because of the nature of film. So it's, in some ways, it's a plus for me by having to make a long exposure. So next thing is we have to get out the camera, which I'll do right now. This is a slight wide angle lens, or a little bit more than a wide angle. I've got a bright screen on the back of this, so it allows me to get a bit of a rough idea of composition. That doesn't look too bad, actually, vertically. I just need my dark cloth. We need a loop to focus with to get a fine focus, which is what I'm going to do. I've got my composition. I've actually panned a little bit one way, but still not quite high. So the beauty of these cameras, I've probably gone a tad too high, so I'm just dropping the lens front panel down a bit to give me a nice space at the bottom, and the sides and edges look good. So now we'll just check the focus again. It should be the same. It's fun under here. You're the only one that can see what you're doing. I hope I'm creating a masterpiece. All right. So we'll just check our light values again. We've got EV of 5. 2. So I'm not going to worry about the highlights. I'm using the zone system exposure method, which, gee, right in that back corner I'm 1 to 5, 1 to 5 is 4. So if I put, in zone system, I put 1 on 4, I have, and I want to use an aperture of, with this lens, probably 22 or 32. It's, I'm going to go 22 because it is a wide angle. And it says a minute here at f22. And because of reciprocity, I have this little chart on the top of my, my light meter. I can't even see 1 minute. Oh, there it is. 1 minute means 3 minutes. So I'm going to put the film in, cock the shutter, take the shot, probably go have lunch, come back, and it'll be done. That's the theory. Using good old Tri-X. I think when I started in photography when I was 17 and I bought my first camera to photograph racing cars. I was a petrol head, still am. 22 bulb setting. And Tri-X was the first roll of film I put through it. And all these years later, I'm still using it. And it is just checking my shutter, it's all working. Film's in, using a Graphmatic, which were made in the 40s. All right, so 3 minutes. Okay, my 3 minutes is up. I'm actually letting it run a little bit because, another 30 seconds or another minute is only going to equate to not even a third of a stop. So I'm just giving myself a bit of insurance on some of that, those darker areas. They were quite dark, and I want to make sure I've got plenty of meat on the negative, plenty of detail there. If the highlights move a little bit further on, I can control that easily by burning that section in. It's not like digital where it blows out, and if you have no detail, the great thing about, that's probably a minute, that's enough. The great thing about film is that you can overexpose and still have detail in the highlights, which is terrific. What else can one say? Just writing down what my exposure was, the lens. You can't see all of this, but I've got subject matter zones, whether it's a horizontal or vertical shot, lens speed, aperture, filter I've used, movements, development, just so I know when I get home that if I do go wrong, I can look at it and find out where I've gone wrong. So if something's happened, if the lens, perhaps if the leaves on the lens don't stay open or take a while or something, the speeds are wrong, you can look back on your information here and say, well, it's underexposed, which means the aperture is closing too far or the speed wasn't correct or anything like that. It's I know with digital everything, generally all the information comes up on the data. But this is old school stuff, so we just use a pen and pencil and paper. I've just shot a 5/4 shot of a different composition, and I'm just going to try and duplicate it on the digital camera here. What I liked was that wind, that light coming in from, which looks like a window, it's actually a little doorway, but my composition was roughly, actually it was a bit more, was that. So my idea here is, that's better, is that you look at the columns, which should have a good deal of light on them, but the central and most dominant part in the picture will be the light through on the back here, coming in through the door. Now, on the screen here, it looks like it's blown out. My histogram is telling me that it's not healthy. It's spiking up that right-hand side, which means there'd be no detail there. So if I darken that down, that's probably more realistic to what we're actually seeing with the eye. So you can see the details come through into that back part of the doorway. You can actually see the stonework. And the light here is quite nice, just hitting this one side of the column. So that's basically my composition. So I want to focus on this front column again. I'm going to use F11. We might use, we'll go F16. Focus, 2-second exposure. Bingo. And more than likely, I'll crop it here so I don't see the bottom of this. And the reason that I do that is because the eye then immediately goes into this part of the photograph, into the middle, and stays in there. I find if I leave that there, because it's such a strong piece on the edge, then I tend to look at the bottom here, which is kind of uninteresting. I want people to look here. So by taking that out, like that, it just becomes like a bookend on this side, and the other one would be down here. The eye goes straight into the middle here. And I do that with trees and other things that where a similar composition might happen. I spoke just before about digital spiking on the highlights, and you lose detail, and when that happens, when the histogram is moved far to the right, it reminds me of the days when I used to shoot transparency as well. You had to expose for the highlights and effectively let the shadows fall where they did, and it was always a hard film to control. And digital, when it first came in, it was similar. It was like shooting tranny film, but because I've shot neg film and primarily black and white film for so long, the highlights are not as big an issue, but it's the shadow area that's the big issue. That's why it's good to give more exposure for film for the shadows, because even though the highlights might be quite dense, you can print them in. But if you blow out digital, and you're not doing all of the fancy HDR and focus stacking and all of that sort of stuff, then you're really in trouble, because you blow them out, there's nothing there, you can't do anything. So that shot ends up in the receptacle, the round one that gets thrown out on Thursdays. I've just seen a picture. This is just outside, on the outside of the priory that we're going into. The thing that attracted my eye about this is the fence line coming up from pretty much the middle of the shot, then curving around and then going to the buildings on the outer edge. And the tree on the right, the bit of shrubbery on the left-hand side balances those two sides, I feel. The pathway is not obtrusive on the right-hand side, and it's just I guess, more a memento shot for me to have and to remember the place. But it's got some nice design to it, nice style. I think it works as a photograph. So we'll hit all the right buttons and take the shot. I'm going to focus, and that doesn't look... There's that compensator again. Here we go. I love the 2-second exposure. Done. Yeah, looks good. Exposure F16. Oh, yeah, see, the issue here is going to be holding focus on this and all the way through to the door. So diffraction is something that sets in when you have the wrong aperture. It's the sweetest. I'm actually going to alter this. Just going to bring that over. Take the focus back a little. Crop a bit there and maybe just crop that top part off. Nice one. I've just seen another composition over there, which, see if I can bring this up for you. Okay, as I was saying over there, cropping the bottom and the top, and I've just zoomed in a little bit on the picture here to show that. And I find sometimes with the digital format, it's too elongated. And I actually want to crop often chunks off the bottom or the top. This might be because I've been shooting 5.4 for so long. My eyes have developed this kind of rectangular look, but it's always better also to shoot a tad wider and give yourself the option of cropping. If you shoot too tight, you can't, expand on that. So that's certainly what I do with that shot I did over there. Now, whether I get my other camera out, looking at this, it's very, it's not monochrome, but it's very sort of singular colour. And I think it's probably more a colour shot than with a subtlety of change of colour than a black and white picture. The nice thing about this camera is it has all these film variations on it, so I can put it on black and white. I can just run back over, hold it up, look at the amount of contrast that's in the shot, and if I feel that there's enough there that by changing the contrast when I'm printing it in the darkroom to make the darker parts darker and the lighter bits a tad lighter, or just holding the lighter bits where they are but darkening the blacks, and if I can get sufficient contrast, it could work. So I'm just a bit unsure. It's easy to look at other things where there's window light and then shadow. You can see how that can work in a black and white tonality, but in this it's kind of all this browny sandstone, and it's just hard for me to, I really have no idea, so I'm going to use this as a guide. So I'll go have a look. So before, when I was saying if in doubt buy both, there's another part to that equation: if in doubt, leave it out. Yeah, I think this can work. I'm not convinced, but I'd rather have it than not have it. So we'll go and set up. If you can keep that dry. So I just don't want to get water on the lens there. That. Oh, so I won't have to, see, this is different. I'm not going to have to crop this because it's cropped to how I see it. It's just the really tricky thing with this is the focus, holding, and you have what you call, what's acceptably sharp. And I can see what happens back there. As I close the lens down, it gets sharper. See, that's probably going to work. I'm really hoping that this is a 1 second exposure so you get the joy of hearing one of the greatest sounds in the world. So there's not going to be much, I got an EV of 6.2 there, an EV of 6.52, so we've got a stop difference between this column and the inside there. If I go to that I got 5.2, same. If I get on that door, I can just, I think, about 4.2. I got 2 stops, give a bit more development, increase the contrast. And 6, so everything's only 2 stops. So it's going to need a bit more contrast. So what do we have? 4.2. We can put that there. We're going to have, no, we're not going to hear that sound. We've got 64, 30 seconds. We've still got a minute. It's a dull old day to have a minute at when you're sort of outside, isn't it? But just for the benefit of, I don't know whether you'll hear this, the microphone, listen to this. Ah, isn't that wonderful? I can see you're all jumping with joy. Just keep it on over the lens, and we've got, oh, bang on. Now we wait. The issue with when you do shots like this is if you're the only one who can see the picture, either the others have no vision or you're so off the mark it's not funny. And I never know which is which. Okay. Bingo. Nailed another one. Interestingly, when I set up the 4x5 or 5x4, I noticed that the cropping in this camera was pretty well what I wanted. Where I mentioned with the digital camera, I would need to crop part of the top, or the digital picture, I'm sorry, crop part of the top and part of the bottom. But this just showed it exactly how I wanted it. I guessed it on the lens, or 150mm, which is the standard lens on these cameras. So it's been fun here at Lanercost Priory. The weather hasn't been the best, but we've managed to make a few pictures, and I hope you've learned something, and I hope it's been a benefit for you. Thanks for watching, and this is Richard White saying goodbye.